Okay, hello everyone. So we're live. So Walter and I are going to be talking about utilitarianism and libertarianism. Walter is a anarchist, and I'm not. But I think that the primary thing we'll be discussing probably is the different moral cases, because basically I'm not an anarchist on entirely consequentialist grounds. I think that anarchy would probably decrease utility, but I think that raises much I think that the philosophical questions are more interesting, and that is the ones we're going to be talking about. So, Walter, do you want to start by just kind of laying out your case against utilitarianism, or just, I mean, maybe there are multiple parts to it, but is there some specific objection that you have to utilitarians?
Well, I'm not exactly against utilitarianism. I'm a libertarian, and I think that libertarianism will bring about the most utility possible. What is libertarianism? Libertarianism is a theory of what is just law. And it says that just law is anyone can do anything they damn well please, except keep your mitts off of other people and their property unless you have their permission. So what are you allowed to do? Well, you can't murder, rape, or steal or kidnap, but you can do anything else you want. And from a commercial point of view, you can buy, sell, rent, lend, borrow, gift, giving, whatever. And every time you do that, utility increases necessarily. For example, you're wearing a lovely sweater and you paid $20 for the sweater. And at the time you purchased that sweater, you valued the sweater more than $20. Otherwise, you wouldn't have bought it. And the guy who sold you that sweater valued the sweater at less than $20. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sold it to you. Now, you might not have liked the sweater. Maybe the sweater was being sold by a pretty girl, and you figured if you bought the sweater, you'd get a date with her. I don't know why you wanted that sweater, but there was something about that sweater that was worth more than $20 to you. So you necessarily gained ex ante, ex post.
Yeah.
Maybe yes, maybe not. So I think that libertarianism is broadly utilitarian. Now, where I diverge from the utilitarians is the utility monster. Suppose there's this monster who gains a lot of utility from killing people. Don't ask. He just enjoys killing people and maybe eating them. Who knows? And if we want to maximize utility, we all have to go be killed by him or eaten by him. So I certainly, don't go along with that. So when utilitarianism and libertarianism diverge, I stick with liberty. But for the most part, there are no utility monsters out there, and it would be impossible to prove because there's no such thing as interpersonal comparisons of utility. So, a lot of people say, well, if you take money from Bill Gates, the last dollar that Bill Gates has, what does he use it to? Light a cigar, and you give it to a starving man, you'll increase utility by taking money away from a rich guy and giving it to a poor guy. But that implies that there is such a thing as interpersonal comparison utility, which there ain't. So to summarize my view, I'm broadly a utilitarian. I'm certainly a libertarian. And I think that in most cases, the two are not in conflict. But when they conflict, then I stick with liberty and I eschew utilitarianism.
Yeah, okay. So there was a lot there. So beginning with the point about just the definition of libertarianism, there are just going to be a huge number of cases both in the real world and in hypotheticals, where I'm going to think that we should sometimes violate a person's right to their body or property. So take one case. Let's imagine that the only way to steal, I think this is an example from humor, the only way to save the world from an asteroid that will kill everyone is to pluck one hair off the head of Harry Binswanger. I would be perfectly happy with taking the hair off his head, and I think that that one ought to take the hair off his head, even though it violates his rights. I don't think that we have absolute property rights. I think that property rights are a useful legal fiction, but I don't think that they exist in any deep ontological sense. So that would be one of the many cases in which we disagree. I also think libertarian.
Wait, let me interrupt you and talk about just that case.
Okay, go ahead.
Before I do, I wanted to mention this movie. It was a wonderful movie. I forget the name of the movie, but the denouement was there was going to be a thermonuclear exchange between the USSR and the US unless we could make a telephone call. And in those days, this is in the 50s or the 60s, there were no cell phones. You needed a dime to make the telephone call, and nobody had a dime. But there was this Coke machine, and somebody was going to shoot the Coke machine and get the dimes and save the world. And somebody said, "Oh, no, you can't do that. That's private property." And this was an attempt to make the Binswanger-Humer case. And the answer to that is, what really libertarianism is all about is not the non-aggression principle. It doesn't say, Humer is wrong when he thinks that it says, oh, and by the way, he wrote this horrible essay, Naps Are for Babies.
I thought that was a great essay. I really enjoyed it.
I think it was a horrible essay. It shows he doesn't understand libertarianism, because libertarianism 101 is the non-aggression principle. But advanced libertarianism, graduate school libertarianism, is that if you violate the NAP, there is punishment for you. That's what it is. It's a theory of punishment.
But in the Harry Binswanger case, Harry didn't violate the NAP. Harry just isn't giving up his private property.
So look, if I shoot that Coke machine to get a dime to save the world, I gotta be punished to the extent of what do you call it? The Coke machine. I don't know. Coke machine's worth $1,000. I got to pay more than 1,000. I don't want to go into libertarian punishment theory now, but I got to pay. And the hell with Harry Binswanger's hair. Suppose what my other example I use is the Martians. What the Martians do is they threaten to blow up the world unless we kill Harry Binswanger. So forget about his hair. I'm going to go kill Harry Binswanger, and I'm going to do it compatibly with libertarianism. And Mike Humer doesn't understand libertarianism, because libertarianism is just a theory of punishment. So what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to me is I'll be punished for killing Harry Binswanger. But then what the Martians do, you know what those rascals do, those rotten Martians? They say that if you punish me, they'll blow up the world. So now, finally, we have a divergence between utilitarianism and libertarianism. But look at how far we have to go. We have to invent Martians who just want to break up libertarianism. Okay, so yes, I admit that if in this case, I'll go with utilitarianism because I want to save the world. I have children and grandchildren. But notice how far you have to go. You have to come up with Martians who are all powerful and not only demand that we kill Harry Binswanger or whoever, any innocent person, but also that you don't punish me as is complied as required by libertarianism. So yes, I finally take the case of utilitarianism vis-a-vis libertarianism. But look at how far you have to push.
But then let's modify the case. So let's imagine the case is I take a hair from Harry Binswanger's head, and the Martians say that let's imagine that after I do that and save the world, let's imagine that I'll die. So I have no way of paying back Harry Binswanger. And let's say that I have no estate, there's no way to compensate him. In that case, where there's no chance for me to compensate Harry Binswanger, would that be a case where libertarianism would diverge? Or I would classify Michael Humer as a libertarian, given that he supports no government. But what do you mean by libertarianism?
Oh, no. Michael Humer is not only a libertarian, he's one of our libertarian leaders. He's a magnificent libertarian. He's just a little inconsistent in these cases unless you bring in Martians. Or unless you bring in your case where look, the punishment for plucking one hair off of Harry Binswanger is $100, let's say. But you don't have $100 and then you die. So again, libertarianism can't work. Okay, I admit it. If you come up with these weird cases, yes, utilitarianism beats libertarianism, but you have to go weird. And in all ordinary cases, the utilitarian monster, the taking money from the rich and giving it to the poor, which is a utilitarian kind of a thing. Libertarianism beats utilitarianism in those cases.
Well, I didn't think that. So, I actually just submitted a paper to a journal about the utility monster called Defanging the Utility Monster, where I defend the utilitarian conclusion about the utility monster. But I mean, well, so one thing is what you said in your reply to Michael Huemer in his dialogues on ethical vegetarianism was you say that the libertarian position is that factory farming eating meat is permissible, and so. And then his book is about why it's not permissible. So that would be one case where there's a divergence, where I think that sound ethical principles very clearly bear out that libertarianism, I think, loses to utilitarianism in that case. In terms of the case about redistribution, well, that would be a case where I think that in the real world, I do support wealth redistribution. But I think that there are cases, so consider the following case. Let's imagine half of people have $1 billion and half of people have nothing. And they have no productive skills, so they're just going to starve to death. But it turns out that if you give them, just $1,000, that will be, they'll be set for life. Everything's very cheap. We're in a world where robots can produce things cheaply. I want to say that I think that we should tax the billionaires $1,000 to make everyone extremely prosperous rather than half of people starve to death. Now, part of that is because I do think that we can have interpersonal comparisons of utility. We can talk about that in a moment. And that seems like a very obvious case where, consigning nearly all the population to misery seems like a bad thing when we can, at the cost of minimal rights violations, avoid misery for most people.
Okay, well,
misery and starvation.
I think you're making a very powerful case in behalf of your views, utilitarianism, and I congratulate you on that. But again, notice the unrealism of the case you have to come up with. They're all going to die unless we take, and it doesn't have to be 1,000, it could be 1 penny. Prices are really cheap, and if all they had was 1 penny, which is like 1 hair of Harry Binswanger's head, yes, if you come up with these concocted weird cases, utilitarianism starts to look very, very good. But you did mention the word ethics. And I just wanted to say libertarian is not an ethical theory, or, well, let me rephrase that. It's a theory of part of ethics, not of all of ethics. And I agree with you. It's ethical to, save starving people. But in the real world, the best way to save starving people is through free enterprise.
And just to be clear, I would largely agree with that. And I'm certainly more libertarian than the average person. I think that free markets have been an unprecedented force for lifting billions of people out of poverty. I think, immigration restrictions are terrible, free trade's great, etc. But well,
look, if you're a fan of Mike Huemer, you got to be more than just a little libertarian. Because remember,
well, I'm not as libertarian as Mike Huemer.
I'm not saying he's not a libertarian. I'm saying he is a leader of libertarianism. I just disagree with him on the NAP and on vegetarianism. I still eat meat, and maybe it's unethical, but as a libertarian, it's not against the law, or rather, it's not against just law. Because just law only applies to human beings, and chickens or cows or whatever are not human beings.
Well, so I disagree with the claim that just law only applies to human beings. But I think even if we grant, so let's imagine Michael Huemer wrote a book called Dialogues on Ethical Not Having Affairs, where he argued, that lots of people are having affairs, and it shouldn't be illegal. It's just a wrong thing, and people shouldn't do it. If that were true, the correct response wouldn't be, well, just law would permit people to have an affair. Even if just law would permit someone to do something, that doesn't mean that one ought to do the thing. So it's perfectly compatible to say that eating meat is seriously morally wrong, which I think Huemer argued, given that it causes vast amounts of suffering for trivial gains. That's perfectly compatible with thinking that in an ideal libertarian society, eating meat ought to be legal.
I agree with you. The two are not incompatible. But again, qua libertarian, I'm not into ethics. I'm just into a narrow part of ethics. Think of a pizza. One slice of ethics is what is just law. That's what I'm really into. There are a lot of other things about ethics, like don't get drunk and study hard and respect your parents and respect your elders. You're not respecting your elders right now. You're trying to rip me down. So you're being unethical, and you're doing a very good job at it. I acknowledge. But I don't really care about ethics that much, and I don't care that you're younger and I'm older and you have to respect me. That's just silly. But that's part of some people's ethics, and it doesn't grab me that much.
Well, so several things. One, Huemer's entire book wasn't making a case about just law. So if your claim is basically that you're not very interested in that, well, then maybe you're not interested in it. But if someone writes a book making an ethical case for something, it's not a good response to say, well, I'm not very interested in that facet of study, any more than a person could say, well, in response to your book, well, I'm just, as a philanthropist, I'm just not very interested in just law. And so maybe that's true. Maybe you, Walter Block, are not very interested in the subject of Humer's book, but that's not a mark against Humer's book. And if much of what you spent the book review saying was basically that qua libertarianism, you're not very interested in the question of animal rights, well, or of whether it's wrong to eat meat, well, maybe you're not very interested in it. But that doesn't seem like a very, saying I find your book uninteresting. That doesn't seem like a good response in a book review. I'd be curious.
I agree with you on that. There are a lot of things I'm not that interested in. I'm not that interested in physics or math or a lot of things. What I was doing in my book review of him is I was testing the hypothesis that he's a libertarian. That interests me greatly, to see if people are libertarians or not. And he doesn't even claim to be a libertarian. He claims to be an intuitionist or something like that.
Well, an intuitionist, that's perfectly compatible with being a libertarian. I think that in his book review, he said he's a libertarian. He said he would describe himself politically as a libertarian, but he doesn't. He disagrees with lots of libertarians on many things, and he doesn't make his entire ideology filter it through the lens of what does libertarianism say about issue X. Okay, therefore I'll think this about issue X.
Well,
I think he would be sympathetic to that.
That's exactly what I do. I have these glasses over here, and these are libertarian glasses, and I look at everything in political economy, not in physics or math or astronomy, but everything in political economy. I look through those libertarian glasses to see what's what. And I think it was perfectly reasonable on my part to look at his book and say, is he a libertarian? And to say, well, not on this issue. And, just because I'm not interested in ethics, I'm a little bit interested in ethics as a non-libertarian. Of course, I'm a normal human being. Normal human beings are interested in ethics. Nothing wrong with that. But it's also of interest, and I don't think that I did something wrong by asking the question, is he libertarian on these issues, and saying, no, he's not.
Well, just to be clear, I don't think you did anything wrong. I'm just disputing that your book review was a adequate refutation of humor. I'm perfectly happy that you wrote the book review. But I'd be curious what you made of it.
It was a refutation of him qua libertarian.
Okay, well, but I think, I basically agree with Humor that what we care about, even if libertarianism turns out to be correct as an economic or as a view of economics and as a view of just law, that certainly will not make it the case that we should filter issues that you agree libertarianism doesn't say anything about, that we should just ignore them because libertarianism doesn't have anything to say about it. There are going to be lots of important moral issues, such as how to be a good spouse, how to be a good person, what charities to donate to, that libertarianism is going to have nothing to say about. And merely pointing out that libertarianism doesn't have anything to say about them, that doesn't seem like a mark against. Michael Humor can write a book about physics without it being reasonable to say, well, when he's talking about the Higgs boson, at no point does he mention just law. But I'd be curious to hear what you make of the scenario where the brief dialogue that he had.
Before you get into the next scenario, let me respond to that.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, if Michael Humor wrote a book about physics or math or astronomy or something like that, I think it would be silly for me to say, well, he's not libertarian in this book. Of course he's not, because it's got nothing to do with libertarianism. But the book he wrote had something to do with libertarianism, and I found places where he wasn't a libertarian.
I don't think that the book that he wrote did have anything to do with libertarianism. I think that the book that he wrote, it was about ethical vegetarianism. And what you've said is that libertarianism is about just law. At no point did he mention just law at any point in the book.
He was attacking. I think he was attacking libertarian, or he was writing incompatibly with libertarianism.
Well, I disagree with that, but there are a lot of places where you allege that in your view. I think that there were a few examples where Humor, like there was maybe one where he suggested that insider trading. Well, no, I actually don't think that anything that he said was incompatible with libertarianism. Even the thing about insider trading was just saying that insider trading, giving that as an example of a potentially immoral thing. But even if we say that maybe there's one part in Humer's book where, because he was writing for a general audience, not for a specifically libertarian audience, he gave an example of something that most people think to be bad, just because the point that he was making was that it's not just biblical morality. Like, just because something's not condemned in the Bible doesn't mean that it's permissible. But there are that maybe at one point he made a point slightly unlibertarian if the libertarian position on insider trading is that insider trading is good. But that seems incompatible with the view that the libertarian position on anything is merely about what just law is. Maybe it's both that insider trading is immoral and that just law would permit insider trading.
Why is insider trading immoral?
Well, just to be clear, I don't have a strong view on whether insider trading is immoral. I remember hearing some economic analysis of why maybe insider trading is a good thing a while ago, but I don't have a strong view on insider trading. My claim is merely that the fact that he uses insider trading as an example, I don't know why that makes the book incompatible with libertarianism, when that clearly wasn't a major focus of the book.
Insider trading is against the law. And it's an unjust law because insider trading is perfectly legitimate. Look, there are two.
You can think that it's both immoral and that it should be legal.
Just like you'd let me give you 1 minute's worth on insider trading. There are two contracts I can make with you. You're a helicopter pilot and an engineer, and I'm an investor. And one contract I can make with you is, look, I'll pay you a very minimal salary, $50,000 a year, and here's a helicopter. Go look for oil, and if you find any oil, you can be my partner, and we'll both buy that land. That's one contract we can make. Another contract is I'm going to pay you a big salary. I'll pay you $200,000 a year, which I guess is a big salary. And again, go out. Here's a helicopter. Go out, look for oil. But if you find any, you can't use your inside knowledge. Now, both contracts are equally legitimate. Whatever we agree upon in this way would be perfectly reasonable. And Michael Huemer doesn't understand that. And this is a basic element of libertarian and economic theory. So I think I'm perfectly legitimate in criticizing it.
I don't think that Michael Huemer doesn't understand that. He was just using it as a throwaway example of something to show that the fact that the Bible doesn't specifically condemn something doesn't make it so that thing is impermissible. I mean, you could go with any example, right? Like you could say, the Bible doesn't say anything about whether spreading misinformation about Walter Block on social media, whether that's immoral. But of course we'd all agree that that's immoral. And so,
well, it's interesting. I don't know if it's immoral because, again, I'm not that into. I'm interested, but I'm not into like what the New York Times did. I gave them a case of voluntary slave contracts, and they quoted me as favoring actual slavery. What they did is they ruined my reputation, or they tried to. And maybe they succeeded in some way. But, in my book, Defending the Undefendable, I have a whole chapter on, libel and slander. And I defend libel and slander. That is, I defend the right of people to engage in libel and slander. Right now, Matthew, I'm going to engage in libel and slander against you. And I'm going to tell everyone that you take a bath with a rubber ducky. And nobody's going to want to play with you, and your girlfriend's going to drop you, and you're going to lose your job, and they're going to kick you out of school and you don't take a bath with a rubber ducky. I just lied. Did I do something that violated your rights? And my answer is no, because your reputation paradoxically consists of nothing that you own. Your reputation consists of everyone else's thoughts about you, and you don't own anyone else's thoughts about you. Therefore, I didn't violate your rights when I ruined your reputation. That's one paradox. Another paradox is I think reputations be safer without libel laws, because now with libel laws, if I say that Matthew takes a bath with the rubber ducky, people tend to, maybe believe it. Whereas without libel laws, everybody be libeling everyone else, and all libels would lose their power.
But the point isn't about just law. Maybe just law would permit libel, maybe it wouldn't. But the claim is that, this wasn't a core theme of Huemer's book. It was just one random throwaway example. And my claim is that, even if we grant that a just system would allow people to libel and slander each other. That doesn't mean that it, like, presumably you think that the New York Times did something immoral. If you lied about me, resulting in me getting kicked out of university, et cetera, that would be an immoral thing, even if it should be legal. Lots of things, cheating on your spouse, it should be legal, but it's certainly immoral.
Well,
so
I don't know if it should be illegal or not. I think it depends on the contract. If the contract is, if you do this, it's a tort, and I can sue you for it. Well, then not only would it be immoral, about which I'm not.
I'm talking about cheating on your spouse, specifically in cases
about which I'm not all that sure, but I am sure that it would be a violation of rights. It depends on the specific marriage contract.
I was talking about just in one where the marriage contract doesn't establish a tort, but just where, like, both spouses presumably have an expectation that the other one would have an affair. In the last few minutes, I mean, maybe this isn't enough time to discuss this, but I think we can do it. So one objection to libertarianism, to your school of libertarianism, that I like is from my friend Amos Wollen, based on conjoined twins. So the idea is basically, suppose that two twins have a conjoined heart. One of them wants to destroy their heart. One of them wants to keep their heart beating. Who gets to decide? And your answer was basically, well, basically neither of them. We'll just decide by lottery or by coin flip. Let's say who owns it. The same way that if two hunters kill a deer at the same time, we'll just decide by coin flip who owns it. And so just one of them at random will own it. But so what do you think of the following counterexample to that? So suppose that there are two conjoined twins who share a set of reproductive organs. And one of them wants to have sex with someone, one of them doesn't want to have sex with someone. Presumably, it would be immoral for the one who wants to have sex to decide to have sex, even if they win the coin flip, forcing the other person to basically have sex when they don't want to, which I would consider to be rape. What would you make of a case like that?
Well, my criticism of Wollen was that it wasn't so much that it was about conjoined twins, it was about tiebreakers. And if you come up and look, there are certain things that libertarianism can't answer that are very important. For example, statutory rape age. If you go to bed with a 5-year-old girl, even though she agrees, you're a statutory rapist because we don't think she's capable of any such agreement. You go to bed with a 25-year-old woman and she agrees, whatever you are, you're not a statutory rapist. Well, where is the proper age? Is it 15, 16, 17, 18? Somewhere in there would be reasonable. Although somebody once married his 13-year-old cousin, which is problematic. What I'm saying is there are gray areas from which you can't deduce from libertarian theory. Well, it's the same thing with tiebreakers. Look, in baseball, when the ball and the runner get to first base at the same time, the tie goes to the runner. But that's arbitrary. And libertarianism has no answer to those questions. So the problem that I have with Wollen is he's just coming up with tie-breaking cases and saying, well, libertarianism is problematic. Well, no other philosophy knows what the proper age of consent is. So I think Wollen was an unjustified, not maybe immoral, I'm not sure, but certainly legal criticism of libertarianism.
Okay, so I think that you're misstating Wollen's criticism. So it wasn't. So I don't think that it's about tie-breaking cases, because it doesn't say that libertarianism can't establish, that libertarianism doesn't have a ready-made answer to who gets it. Because I'd agree that basically, lots of theories will say basically it'll be a coin flip. But the claim is that any answer that you give, regardless of whether is going to either be have absurd implications or be incompatible with libertarianism. So one thing that you might say is basically that neither of them own their shared organs. But if you say that neither of them own their shared organs, that results in a problem, which is that in a case where, let's say, the reason why rape is wrong is because on the libertarian account is because you own your body. And so on this account, if you raped them, then that wouldn't be wrong because they don't own their body. So that accounts out. Now, the account that you suggested in the article is, well, we basically just at random decide, the same way that we arbitrarily at random in a baseball game decide that one person, that to give it the ties go to the runner or something. But if you say that but I think that view ends up having really weird implications. So if you say, so that, I think one counterexample that has is the counterexample that I gave before. If you say that one of them gets to decide, then one of them gets to unilaterally decide to have sex with someone else, even if the other one really doesn't want to have sex. And yet that seems like a case of rape. And so that seems like a counterexample to the way that you had for adjudicating.
I hope that the New York Times doesn't listen in here, but then I would say, well, rape is justified. But again, this is a very, very weird case. I'm against rape ordinarily, but if you're going to come up with these Martian type examples, well, then I'm forced to say rape is too bad. What do they say? When rape is inevitable, relax and enjoy it, or something like that. Now, look, the New York Times is going to screw this all up, and they're going to, say that I favor rape. I don't favor rape, for God's sakes, but if you push hard enough, I favor murder. Look, I was favoring the murder of Harry Binswanger in order to save the world, not favoring it exactly. I'm against murder, but in order to save the world where everyone dies, including Harry Binswanger, it's sort of like what does they say in math? You can't divide by zero, because when you divide by zero, things get weird. Well, when you come up with these weird examples, things get weird. Well, look, I promised you a half hour. The half hour is up, so I got to get off. But I greatly enjoyed this, and if you're willing, I'd be willing to do it again. And I don't mean again, but have another interview or another debate with you, or another discussion with you in a month or so.
All right, great. This was fun. Talk to you later. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye.
Take care. Bye.